needed for you to be able to build and to launch your startup, both here and globally. All right. Alongside that is I'm a contract manager for a certified one. So for all matters, contracts and commercial deals, I do that. I am a patent agent. How many of you have created innovations that you feel requires IP or patent? Oh, good number. That's good. And on matters outside work, that is low, life outside work, is I am a farmer and I'm a chess player. So I'll use Yvonne's theory of what we have in common. So how many guys are either farmers or come from farming background or have a farm back home? That's a good number. That's a good number. All right. This one might have less. How many of you play chess? I'm looking for, I have a chessboard today. So in case anyone is up for a challenge, I have, yeah, so I have good competitions today. So that is me in a nutshell. So today, my focus is on matters legal. And then the biggest question is, Nori, why do you need to learn law when I am busy innovating and I just need to get money, go to market and all these things? No. But I want to give you a good example of the building that you're in, right? So what makes a good building? What makes you decide that this is the house that you want to live in? Any guesses? And if we could keep this interactive, you also get a lollipop from Yvonne. All right? The size of the rooms, all right? So who else? So you're hunting, all right? Security, all right? Any other? Yes? Nearest to amenities? The gentleman at the back with the gray shirt? Sorry? Foundation? That's a good one. Any other? You're making a decision about moving into a new house. So what are you looking for? Sorry? Sorry, what? The color of the walls. That's a nice one. Okay? So this is what law is for you. Law is what is not seen. So the colors of the wall, right? The sizes of the kitchen, the appearance and the views and all that are what you do in your business sense is what you call, your branding. Yeah. You're looking for spaces, so you're looking for money and all that. So the beautiful things that you see are not what law is for you as a startup. So law is what that gentleman said there. It's a foundation. Now, if you don't have a strong foundation, we've all seen the houses crumble. Kiambu, Roiro. Where else? You've seen houses crumble, right? So they crumble because the foundations were wrong. But then if you do not have a strong foundation, your business will fail. So I'll start with the question that this was a survey conducted a couple of years ago on why startups fail. The first one being they ran out of cash. So how many of you have said that your startup would fail because it might run out of money? How many agree? All right. The second one being there was no market needed. How many agree? The third one being somebody got them to outcompete them. Anyone agree? Right. How many agree that their business model could have been wrong? Now, how many of you would agree that there were legal challenges? And I'll get into what legal challenges that would be. How many would agree? All right. At least you agree with me because you're in this session. And so on and so forth. But for me, and for purposes of conversations, we ran this interview locally, and these numbers changed for our context. The context was 42% said that it was wrong timing. You have an amazing idea, but it's just not the right time to execute. Case in point, who remembers Skype? Skype did so well, right? And it was slightly ahead of its time. It was good invention, but it was slightly ahead of its time. Because came COVID, I don't think they innovated further, right? Who remember the glasses? Was it the Google glasses? Who remember them? Again. So sometimes it's a question of timing. Team execution. Who agrees with this? So I'll use this as an opportunity to gauge in your room. How many of you are building a business idea or have already started either you have an idea or you've already started executing? How many of you have done it? By show of hands. So what percentage would that be? About 60%? Let me see the ones that are not building an idea. You're here to learn. You don't have a business startup or an idea. How many of you? One. So the rest of you have an idea. One or two. Now, how many of you have a team? If you have let's start with co-founders. How many of you have co-founders? Okay, I will challenge you so that I see you better. Could you stand up if you have a co-founder in your team? Let's see the brave ones. So you have a co-founder. That's a good number. Remain standing if you have other members of the team, meaning you've started employing people or you're looking to do it. Remain standing if you have that. I mean, if you're already in the process of trying to onboard a team or you already have a team. So I'll tell you this, you may have a good idea, but if you do not have the right team to execute, there's more likely that 2% chance that your startup will fail. You can get it because of poor team execution, and I'll get into why. Of course, the rest of the things will apply. So today's session is just on legal considerations. What should you consider when you're getting started on your startup? The first thing I want us to think about is when we're building this foundation, we've all agreed we're building a foundation for your business. Sindio, when you're building this foundation, you need to figure out what is your foundation based on. Remember the parable of the person who threw away seeds. Some landed on sand, yeah? Some landed in green fertile soils, and so on and so forth. So you need to choose your land. So consider this your land. So the first business vehicle, we call them business vehicles, that people opt to do is what we call a sole proprietorship. So that is a business name. Anyone heard of it? So it's the simplest. So it will cost you, if you go to eCitizen, 650 shillings. It is for you alone. That's why it's sole proprietorship. So for those of you who have a team, this will clearly not apply. So the good thing is it's very fast to do, it's very cheap, and it will allow you start signing contracts and documentation for your business. So that's a good thing. But we're building startups. No, we want strong foundations. So I'll say don't. Do not go this direction. Why? Any guesses? Any guesses? Now this one is for a lollipop. Any guesses? Go ahead. You take all responsibilities for your business. Lawrence, I think we can give somebody a lollipop. There's one more very solid reason as why you should not go for this. Let me hear. It's not scalable. Might not be the reason. Any other? But that's true. Go ahead. That is what I'm talking about. It has unlimited liability. So what this means, the gentleman on the side, Lawrence, we have somebody who we need to give a lollipop to. There's no separation between you and your business if you go for a sole proprietorship. Meaning, if your employee sees your business, they sue who? You. If KRA sues your business, they sue who? And if you have a contract dispute, who is sued again? Again. It is unlimited liability. You don't want that level of risk if you're growing your business. The gentleman, you can have your hand up so that he gives you a seat. And we also had somebody at the side. So the second business, now you've decided, now if you're doing an SME, it's fine. Or an MSME, this is fine. A cottage business, this is fine. But you're building a startup, it is not fine. Now, again, if you're also building an SME and you've decided, I'm no longer doing it, so I will go with, let me get your name, Aldri. So I'm going to go with Aldri and say, Aldri, can we start a business together? So we become partners. So it is the next level. Now, the good thing about partnership is it allows me expand my team. So I'm no longer alone. We are building together. But the bad thing about that partnership is the same thing that that gentleman mentioned. Now, it has unlimited liability. Only that, he could also be carrying your partner's liabilities. Because if your partner decides to do the worst thing in the name of the business, what will happen? And they disappear, you also carry their liability. So comes in something called a limited liability partnership. Sorry, it's not on the slide, but it's right before limited liability company. So a limited liability partnership allows you to have that partner, myself and Audrey, as partners. But here's the catch. At least it limits our exposure. When do we use this? If you're running a consultancy. Anyone interested in consultancies? Yeah. So we use limited liability partnerships for that reason, for two things. One, it doesn't have a structured share split. So I can't come in and say I will own 70% or you will own 30% or vice versa. Because it's assumed you're both partners. Of course, you can sign a partnership deed, but it's much more complex than that. However, the reason why you use it for consultancy is simple. Because of the tax breaks. So the taxations are aligned to the partnerships. So you're not double taxing the company or the partnership and yourself. So that's good for consultants because I can be able to run something and I'll be taxed as a partner. Then comes in the only legal vehicle acceptable for startups. That is called limited liability company. For obvious reasons, it limits your liability. Your business or your company is a separate human or persona from you. It acts like a human. It can own properties, it can sue, it can also be sued, right? So you're not the one being sued, it's the company. So if the company goes bankrupt, you're not the one going bankrupt. You've seen when startups say things are hard, we had to file for bankruptcy, right? The other thing is you're able to split shares, and we'll show you how shares are split as we go on and so on. It can also scale up. So you're able to have different ways of, and I'll show you how you register in different jurisdictions. Now, there are people who decide, I'm not interested in a financial business model. I'm into social impact. That is also acceptable. So there are two ways in which we do it in Kenya. We have the limited by guarantee. It is the closest thing you have to a non-for-profit because you behave as if you're a non-for-profit, but almost in a company structure. It's the one most used. In fact, most organizations and associations like the Chamber and the likes are registered as this. So if you're building a community, let's say, for those of you who build communities and clubs and whatnot, this is one of the easiest ways to do it. It can own property. If you're registering a normal society, it won't, right? But this one will. NGO is also something that people do, foundations and the likes. But the preference is always going for the limited by guarantee. So are we together on Matters business vehicle? So which business vehicle are we going with? LLC. Okay. Unless you're not operating in a startup, in which case we do not discriminate non-startups. Right. So when you've decided that this is the vehicle that I'm going to use, or this is the land building my foundation on, what is the next thing that you do? You need to figure out the requirements for that business vehicle. It's like you bought a vehicle, you know car. So you have to make sure it has insurance, yeah, service, all these things. It's roadworthy, so to say. So we need to make sure that our vehicle is roadworthy. The first one is obviously you will register the business. In Kenya, we register through the eCitizen portal. So that has been made easy. It's probably one of the most robust systems globally. I'll give you a catch, and this is a quick advice for those of you who go to register on eCitizen. This is where you make or break your foundation. You could have chosen a fertile land, but you could also destroy it at that point. If you do not have legal advice, let me give you some legal advice. Be very careful when you select certain sections. Don't go to say we have employees. I know I've asked how many employees are in the room. You're starting. You don't have guaranteed employees. So don't go to put in huge number of employees. That's one. Two, or any, because it gives you tax obligations before you're ready for tax obligations. So that's rule number one. And I've had to sort out so many companies when KRA is telling you was 300,000 on a payee obligation that you don't have and you can't pay. Number two, do your valuations well. Sometimes we come in and say, we own 100,000 worth of shares. No, you actually could own more than that. Okay? You could be owning more than 2 or 3 million worth of shares. And the reason being, we'll get into how you do share split. And then number three is be very careful with how you select your shareholding percentage. Please don't do lovey-dovey. Me and you, and let's say me, Audrey, and Yvonne, we're good friends. So we're giving each other 30, 30, 30, or 33, 33, 33. Once the CL12 is out, it's very hard to remove people. So I'll get into that. The second thing you will need is licenses. Some talked about things like CMA licenses. We're talking about CBK licenses. So you need to figure out what license does your business vehicle need. So if you're a fintech, you know you could have a requirement for CBK. If you cannot get that license, you need to think through how then do I work around, like you gave example of how DTB Bank helps. If you're doing investor portals, then of course you have things like CMA licenses and they're different, yeah? So you need to figure out what licenses exist for my business, because you also don't want to get into regulatory issues with somebody saying you're transacting and you don't have the right license for it. Sindio? Number three, you may need permits depending on the type of business you're doing. Let's say you decided we're going to open shops across, different places in Nairobi. You might need county licenses for certain things. You're going into market. You might need that level of permits. You are maybe getting into a food tech situation and you want crowd, people do crowd kitchens. So you'll need health. You might need NEMA and whatnot. So you need to think through, again, within that space, what kind of licenses exist. Okay? And by the way, in the world of ChatGPT, you shouldn't not figure out. At least it should give you a bit of a guidance. Right. So now that you've decided, you've set up your vehicle, you've given it the roadworthiness that it requires. The next thing you need to think about is, how then do I start operating this vehicle? Sindio? There are two things that I will say. One is your organization or your idea is an intellectual property. And I'll get into intellectual property on our second session. But it is an intellectual property. So you have an idea. How many of you will say, I'm sure you all have, where you've come in and said, listen, I have this idea, but I'm not sure whether I should come and tell you, because I don't know what will happen if I tell you and you've not signed an NDA. If you felt that way, let me see your hand up. This side hasn't. If you felt that way, okay, 3 people, 4 people are honest on this side. So we want to make sure that by the time you leave today, it will no longer be your fear, yeah? That you'll be better armed to know how to deal with your either idea or your MVP or your prototype or your actual business without the fear of losing it. And even if you lose it or somebody grabs it, you know how to deal with it. Okay. So we'll get into that in the second session. But I want to get into business. So the ones who say that you have co-founders, by show of hands, how many of you have signed a co-founders agreement with your co-founders? Let me see you. Stand up. Let's see. 5. So you have co-founders agreement. Just remain standing. Is it vested or not vested? And I'll get into vesting, what that means. Is it vested shares or not vested shares? Vested. For how long? Sorry? 3 years. 3 years. Vested or not vested? How long? 4 years. For how long? 5 years. So that means it has a cliff. All right? Vested or not vested? Not vested. Sir, vested or not vested? Sorry, vested or not vested? Not vested. Good. I'll come to you in a bit. Thank you so much. So, the first thing you do before you go to your employees is amongst yourselves as others, you need to do what? Agree and put it down in writing. You know what we call that in legal terms? Prenup. Yeah? This is a marriage, by the way. I will tell you what, some businesses last long in some of your relationships. Ukweli urongo. Yeah? Think about it. How many times have you broken up in campus? Yeah? And you knew this is it. Huyu ni yeye tunamaliza na yeye. 2 weeks later, amesonga. Huyu mtu ulikuwa savings yake hata ulimpeleka date. Yeah? So it's the same thing with your business. Some of these business partners will last longer than those relationships. However, think about what happened when you broke up. How bad were things? How bad were things? Very bad for some of you. If the rest of you were very mature, ask yourself whether there was love in the first place. it gets bruisey. Sindio? Now, reflect back to your first few days, butterflies, with, good memories, good plans, yeah? You had to console the person almost with everything. How do I look? Is this dress fine? Yeah? Sindio? You remember those days? Then you remember how you broke up. Did any of that happen in the beginning matter? Kama ni mbaya? That's the same thing that happens with businesses. So you start with your co-founders. Everything is lovely. It is a very beautiful honeymoon phase. Sindio? Until you realize, Audrey nowadays is no longer interested in this business. Or Wanjiro is taking that money and using it for their other things. Or Kamau, we received money and they used it to take their girlfriend to Diani or Maldives. Ni wapi kwingine nilisikia mnaenda? Yeah? Sindio? And then you're wondering, me, I'm here working day and night. Silali, we have exams, I'm not working. But Kamau has decided what? So you know what happens? Things start getting bad. Sindio? But remember, you and Kamau own 50-50%. And you need to sit down with your investors and raise more money. And Kamau is no longer pulling their weight. So how will you remove Kamau from your business? He's an equal shareholder. He's an equal partner. CR12 inasema ni wewe na Kamau. Kamau anakuambia do what you want. This is my company. So what do? So if you did not have an agreement that governs how your company and your relationship operate, what will happen? It becomes a worse breakup than the one you had. I promise you. The second thing, once and we'll get into co-founders agreement, the second thing is your employees. Sindio? So when you hire people, even if they're interns, give them something. Even if they're volunteers, give them something. You know why? So this person, I decided to hire Ochieng, comes to my company, ilikuwa vibes and inshallah, si ndio? As you call it. Then the day Ocheng leaves with the entire brand and the entire list of clientele. Remember, the two of you had signed nothing. Si ndio? So how do you go about that? Ocheng also decides he's gotten a job right in the middle of you trying to prepare for your investor meeting tomorrow and decides he's not coming with no notice. How do you deal with that? So are you thinking about those scenarios? Yeah? Now, those are not the rosy side of startups. In the rosy side of startups is getting money. But behind the scenes is what? The preparation. So you get money, but how is that foundation? So you need your employee agreement. Then you're also going to need vendor agreements. So you need to buy, supplies from so and so. One of your biggest vendor agreements that you sign, and I will challenge you for a fact, is things people like graphic designers. How many of you have gone in and hired a graphic designer or a software dev, website dev? Ni wawili tu, Yvonne pekee na wawili. I mean, if you have, be proud. It's okay. Hata kama ulimhire 10K, it's fine. Hiring is, in fact, you should be proud. You've circulated money in this economy. The question is, did you sign any contract with them? What happens with that graphic designer mwenye amekutengenezea logo akidecide kuiregister trademark ni yake? Ama you software dev amekutengenezea app halafu amesema since you did not there is nothing, I have decided to clone it and create the same one for somebody else. What would happen? Now, an interesting case, what happens mkikosana na cleans out your entire code and you no longer have access? You've had such cases. What would happen? Do you have a contract with them? Now you're also selling. You've sold a service. Let's say to Anza. It's a very bad example because I actually pay my service providers, but assuming you've already delivered things to me and I've told you I'll pay you in 14 days. It is word of mouth. Yeah? But after 14 days, what do? Wengeshi, where are you? You owe me 30,000. I was supplying you XYZ. So I'll tell you, don't worry, I'll call you back. We're processing. 2 months later, owner, grey tick. We've moved from blue tick to grey tick. Yeah? To blocked. So if you need to look for me or prove to me, even if you went to court, what is the justification that you actually supplied this to me? What can you use to prove? Yeah? It is your word versus against mine, Sindo. I'll just frustrate you. But if you did have an agreement with me, and by the way, when I mean agreement, I don't mean 32 pages thing. Let me see the sheets of paper that ziko mbele yenu. You can literally agree where you are. Mwandikiane nitakusupply hii, utanilipa siku fulani. If you don't pay me by 10th, it will incur an interest, mwekanga hizo. It will incur an interest of 10% per annum until you pay. In the case of anything that you have all these things, just put that down. It doesn't need to be too complicated. The other place you can do it is also on your emails. Contrast doesn't need to be too technical. The technicality of it makes things easier. Yeah? But contract is what? It is an agreement. They are called agreement. If you notice, I'm not talking about it's contract and agreement. It's called an agreement. You and I. To may agree, I'm providing this for you. You can agree on a napkin. It's a club or your what it is, and you've agreed this will happen. You can put it on a napkin and it will still be valid. So that is how you run operations of your company. Tuko sawa so far? And okay. So today, I will focus on this beginning session. I'll focus on I think I've already focused a little bit on why legal documents are important. We'll talk about the potential risks of not having documents in place. I think I may have mentioned it a bit, so let's not go back into it. Now let's get into the founders agreement and the shareholders agreement. Before I get into it, before I get into it, you are in a table with a group of people, right? So I'll give you a scenario. We can call a company, what do we call it? Give me a name. Call it Pia. No. You're all registering a company copy, or I'll give you guys 5 minutes. Mine I'm calling Pia, you choose it. You can, I would like you to think through, if you have a company, yeah, how do you decide who owns what? Think through within that. Let me give a good scenario here. Nataka to brainstorm before we get into this. This we were supposed to do in the morning. That's why you're finding coffee break sessions. Just a bit. Sorry, I am proceeding forward. It's a bit slow. So I'm giving you this case study just for 5 minutes, and we can do it very fast. Okay. So this is a case scenario. You have Sarah and John, they're co-founders, but you can also add a co-founder. They've met in a networking event and decide to start a company together. So Sarah has a background in marketing and is responsible for customer acquisition and branding. Okay? While John is a software developer. So they want to split their equity 50-50 without discussing their contributions or any future plans. You see the issues that we're discussing? So they have no legal documents in place and their working relationship has deteriorated over the past few months. I want you to look at this and help them restructure differently. There is no right or wrong. Within your group, point out what is wrong here. Yeah? And let's see what we can. The best team that comes up with more issues and best ways to help them obviously get something from me. Okay? So 5 minutes. We start our clock. So we'll back at 11:47. If you've read that, I want to move on to the next slide. You can use this as pointers for what you can prepare. So we have 3 minutes to go. Feel free to use any of these, one or both. All right, all right. So let's hear the potential startup lawyers we have in the room. So which team wants to go first? I'm just picking three teams. So which team wants to go first? Give us your quick analysis. They don't have to be perfect. Which team? Sorry, there? All right, come. We have team one, team two, one more team. This side, any team? They're all from here, all right. So for the team leads, the ones that I've picked, one and there was one at the back. Or was it you? Who it was you? I thought somebody who picked the hand, right? All right. You come. All right. You can also join us. Yeah. So I need one more team on this side. All right. So go ahead. I'll have honorees from you and one more team from this side. All right. So you can join us as well. So who really feels that I really okay? So so we have 5 teams now. So you can come running. So give us your quick analysis.
So I'm Moses from ZTech, and we just got some of the problems that Sarah and John were facing, which was there was no agreement, there was no business objective, they had no business model. All they had was a concept, which was a technology startup. Yeah. Okay, so what they would do is come up with a business plan, define the roles, come up with a documented legal agreement. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right.
I'm Immaculate. Team over there. So as for us, we saw that when they decided to start this whole company, they just randomly decided to set a 50-50 without discussing their contributions. And that was the main source of conflict. So to solve this conflict, the first thing is for them to define their boundaries, for them to set specific roles on what they need to do to achieve their goal for their company, and to define their kind of boundaries. For us, we were like, since it's a startup and they probably don't have a lot of monetary capabilities, probably go through a mediator to advise them wisely, because there will be an external source from them to advise them on the roles that most probably kind of guide them to choose and define their boundaries. And they also had no form of hierarchy in their roles, which is really important, because this will set a lot of boundaries and is everything there. So that is how we sought to resolve their conflict.
All right. That's team 2, team 3. Remember, you vote for who has done the best. Huh?
Good morning. My name is Samson from ZTech. From the case study, it's based on Sarah and John. I feel like these two people are aspiring innovators based on the thrill of meeting up, say day one, and you meet someone who you share the same passion. So from that thrill, you're like, let's just do what's best for us at the moment by sharing the equity 50-50. But in real sense, it's not the best option for the business. It's just the best option for now at the moment. Apart from that, another issue it was on how they decided that the business, the startup on what they didn't like. For John, he mentioned like something from software, and Sarah comes from another background. So I feel like on about shares, you should do what's best for the business, not what's best for you at the moment. Due by time, as time goes by, the startup is going to grow. The more it grows, it's going to expand. If it expands, there are like the foundation won't be stable. There will be cracks in the foundation. The cracks are the conflict is when you decided to share the company 50-50, and later on you don't see the same vision from the previous pasts. So, and they should consult, like they should have formed a prenup, involved consultants, lawyers to make all this legal. Yeah.
All right, good morning. I'm Isaac Wandeto, USIU Africa. So it's exact the same case that we have here. It might be, it might not be, but the urge for Sarah and John to work together was a motivation maybe in such setup. They felt like we are really motivated, we have this, we need to do it, we need to start it. When do we start? As soon as now. And so they kicked it off. So they did not have the background connection of, do we really have the love for this? Do we have matching objectives to do this? Do we have aligning goals that we can match? And do we have the energy? Do we have matching energy to go ahead together and register as a company and work together? So they should have worked on that as well. From what other team have said here, there was no co-founders agreement. There was no exact outline of what you will be doing. As you see, it's just that it was just I would say a drill. Yeah, you are good in software, do it. I'm good in graphics, do it, and then let's go. And also there was no framework for shareholding. Also, there was no document stating how they would do the funding. The funding strategies, will it come from individual savings? Will we have to pitch to raise funds for our startup? Will we have to engage investors and get to partnerships? And also, there was no a discussion about the IP and who owns the product that they make. Sarah might one day wake up and say, John was my kijana ya mkono, and runs with the idea. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Perfect.
Gregory here, data scientist from ZTech University. For me and my team, John is a software developer, while Sarah is a marketer. So I don't think from the first point, maybe John doesn't have passion for that motivation, or the motivation for the product, but he only has motivation for development, since he's just a software developer. Number two, they didn't create a legal agreement. So they should have had or started by creating a legal agreement. Another solution is they have to adjust. Another thing is they should ensure that both of them, they have a passion for the product, not just John is just only developing the product. They should just love the product first and get motivated together as they work together. Next is that they should implement and adjust. Like they should have to scale up on how they do their things. Next is get help and seek mediation. Since they are now at a conflict, they should seek a mediator, come at a one-point discussion, and get help and solve the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Quickly, the final one. Hi, everyone. My name is Mabila, and for my team, I would like to first tell you what we found as the issues, just like most of us have already mentioned, and then the steps that we thought could help them like resolve the issue.
So of course, the first thing that we thought was an issue was the fact that they really didn't have a relationship. I remember yesterday one of our speakers had told us that, or actually today, he was telling us that when you look at your classmates, you ask about how does this person do this, or who's best at doing A, B, C, D, you get to understand who you can partner with in certain areas. But these people just met randomly at a conference, so they don't really understand the depths of skills and even the character of in each other before getting into like a relationship. And that could have been something that deteriorated, that caused the deterioration of their relationship because they actually never understood each other before getting into a partnership. So the other thing was also lack of role definitions. So they don't know like who is supposed to do A, B, C, D. Like it's not clearly stated. You are in charge of, and you are in charge of legal stuff. You are in charge of financial stuff, and this person is in charge of management or in charge of, so that is not clear. So it's like everybody sort of track everything, and that's why like they can create a lot of clashes. And the other thing is no legal agreements. Like there's no strict agreement that, okay, if you don't do A, B, C, D by this and so time, then the other person can take this amount of action, or there is this amount of repercussions that are going to happen. So like I can just do whatever I want because there's nothing that is going to happen to me in the business. And for the steps, we said the first thing they really need to do is to sit down and discuss. They are at odds, and for them to make any action, they have to sit down and talk first. They have to make an agreement that, yes, we recognize that there's something wrong and we have to walk through it. Whether that has to come from one of them or both of them equally, but they have to first talk. And after talking, we think the first thing they should do is they should seek legal advice. They have spoken and spoken. Probably they don't even know they have to define their roles, or probably they don't even know they need legal agreements, or if they know, they don't know how to do it. So they need to get a legal advisor who is going to tell them, okay, this is how we should walk through this and solve this issue. And through that, the things they should do is then to make a legal agreement that, okay, this is how this business will work, this is how your roles will play, this is what you should do, this is how things should be like. Then make like clear definitions of their roles. You should do ABCD, I will do ABCD. And then the other thing is, my team said that the equity should never be 50-50%. The reason why we said this is because there is no deciding power here. So like if they're having clashes, this person is saying, oh, let's take B routes, and this person is saying, let's take A routes. There is no one that can say, okay, you know what? We are not making an agreement. I think let's do B, and there will be an agreement, because there's no deciding power. They have 50-50% rights. So like you cannot tell me what to do. But so our team is saying that there shouldn't be equity, shouldn't be 50-50. There should be a deciding power. Someone should be like the founder and the other person be the co-founder, and the founder should have like the deciding rights. So that when things are at odds, you as the co-founder know that, okay, I understand, I will let them take the lead because they have the deciding power. That would also make things easier. So that's from my team. Thank you.
All right, all right. I feel like these guys are doing good at teaching. Do I need to be here? So we have team 1, team 2, team 3, team 4, team 5, and team 6. So who did a good job according to you? You can shout out. Team 6, 5, 4, 6, 1, 4. All right. I hear a huge shout for 1, 4, and 6 and 4. And 1. And 2.
Like for this business, yeah, for this business to be successful, they'll have to come up with a business plan. And like from what the other teams have mentioned, like there's no clear business plan.
All right. I mean, these guys have done an amazing job. Sindio, wameskiza. One thing I liked is almost every team had something unique. There were teams who talked about mediation here. There are teams who talked about business plan. There were teams who talked about, in fact, brought in something unique about the shift and the way scale of shareholding. So that's amazing. So I don't know, Yvonne, do you think we could gift these young gentlemen sweet? Do we have enough? All right. So I think you all did amazing. First of all, for the courage to come here and represent your teams. And I'll allow you all pass by Yvonne and take a switch if you want. All right. All right. Thank you all. Clap for them, guys. So I think the thing that was very, very apparent from everybody is defining of roles. By the way, I know I pointed out on that question some of the issues, but if you stuck to the issues I pointed out, that means you're not digging deeper. And that is why I like that some of you went to dig deeper over the issues that I was talking about, the co-founders. So let's quickly get into it. I have a very short window of time before I release you for the next one. Is amongst your co-founders, you must have clarity of roles. Yeah, it is not enough that you start a business with a person if you don't know what this person is bringing on the table. So these are 4 different things that you all can do. The first one is you need to understand why role clarity is important. You do not want to crash. So if I'm doing legal, you're also doing legal, and we don't even know who runs the business and who is out there looking for money, that's an issue already there, okay? It doesn't matter whether you're from the same background, but you have to know who is taking lead, okay? The second one, and I think you colleagues alluded to, is understanding your strengths and weaknesses. Do you know why it is important for you to do a SWOT analysis for your team? We do SWOT analysis for organizations. Cindy, if you've been taught SWOT analysis, let me see your hand. Now, how many of you have done SWOT analysis for your teams? A few of you, that's good. SWOT analysis, when you're doing SWOT analysis, yeah, you're able to tell, I am a morning person or I'm a night person. I mean, it's obvious. Sometimes we talk about it, but you don't realize how much implications it could be. Because if you're clearly not a morning person, and you're the person we want you to be appearing in morning meetings at 7 a.m., chances are you're going to be the one failing us. But it could be the one staying late at night coding. You get the difference? It doesn't mean I have to force you into a certain way. It's a question of what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. You want to amplify your partner or your teammate's strengths and cover their weaknesses. That is true trust. But it has to only happen if you trust each other. Then that thing is delegating effectively. Over time, as you build the organization, you're going to realize that you cannot do everything alone. You're going to have some people who will support you. But if you do not delegate effectively, meaning you don't have clear structures within your organization, you fail. One of the things I always say is create processes, have SOPs, standard operating procedures, on, for instance, how do we onboard people? How do we go looking for business? Do you have certain templates that make it faster for you to do proposals? Do you have a pitch deck that is, continuously changing? How often do you update or remind your investors? Do you even have a guiding template or something for that? Yeah. So those are some of the things that you start creating gradually. And then you start realizing, I don't need to be the one doing this. So and so needs to do it, but they have a guideline on how they do it, right? So that you're running. And the fourth thing is establishing accountability. How do we do it for organizations? We have KPIs, yeah? That's one of the easiest ways in which we have KPIs, but there more accountability amongst your co-founders that goes over and above KPIs. For instance, financial accountability. So when you register, how many of you have registered a company bank account? That's amazing. So you'd start thinking, amongst you and your co-founders, how do you sign? And you can say, from amounts up to this amount, you can get from the bank without needing a co-signature. But over and above this, you need a co-signature. Then we will do monthly reconciliation. We will need to account for everything. You can use apps that exist. I think there's an app called Boya that makes it similar to what Shums does, but they help you run business and you're able to assign and all that. That's financial accountability. There are other accountabilities. You also don't want to be the person who is in and out. If your co-founder is building something with you, and then tomorrow they're going to do the same thing, but with somebody else, that is, you clearly lack integrity. So there are issues, areas where you need to look at conflict of interest, even amongst your own co-founders, before you agree. And how we make this work is through a co-founders agreement. I'll give you all, before we leave, a good checklist of a co-founders agreement. I'll mention why it's important. As I mentioned, it's a prenup for your organizations. So the key elements that should be on the co-founders agreement, you won't find them here, but you'll find in what I share, is number one, intellectual property. Somebody mentioned it here, Sindio. But IP should never belong to a founder. It should belong to the company. However, and there's a disclaimer, should you fail in your company, then you can have a clause that talks about, in case you split, who goes with what. Okay? But the first instance is you transfer IP to what? The company. If you go to fundraise and the first thing is a question of who owns IP, it is the fastest way of getting your investors out of your door. Because what are they investing in anyway? It's IP. So the IP goes to the company. That's thing number one. Number two is how you split shares. I think we saw the case of Sarah and John. We're talking about 50-50. You've gone into eCitizen, your CR12 reads 50%, John 50%, Sarah, the company, 0. You're both founders and shareholders. Sindio, that is the worst thing that are investor wants. So the structure of, and I said, if you're running an SME, it is fine. I mean, especially if you're doing it with your partner, your girlfriend, your spouse, it is fine. I mean, in any case, when you split after marriage, the property still goes 50-50, it's fine. But we are building startups here. Senior. So if you're doing a startup founder should not own shares. At least not at first. So we have something called vesting of shares. And the vesting of shares, this is how it goes. We will agree. Myself, I'll use Audrey, I'll use, let me use Yvonne. I'll get your names over time. And we will say, we own a third of the company and we will have an option. And I'll give you a dilution example soon. But how we do it is, my 30%, I will not get it day one. See, the problem with Sarah and John is they own 50-50. Tukikosana, I go with my 50, it becomes dead stock. But this is what it will say. Day one, I will own 0 shares. The company will hold my shares and then I will earn it. How do you get paid your salary? Is it beginning or end of the month? End of the month, when you're sure you've done the work. Sindio? It's the same thing with your shares. So beginning of the year, you own 0. So we talk about standard vesting period is a 4-year vesting period. For those who are doing 3 years, it is a 4-year period with a 1-year cliff. Cliff means the same way you have a cliff, Rift Valley cliffs and whatnot. If anything happens in the first year, you jump off the cliff. You get nothing. So when you're starting your first year, you're testing a hypothesis. It may or may not work. So what we tell people is, come on board. Let's build something. Me, you, Sarah, John, Kamau. We are all starting this. If you leave within the first 8 months, you go with nothing. Why? You also want to encourage people to build with you. If after you've done 12 months, you start earning your shares. Okay? So you've done your cliff. So then now you properly vest over the next 4 years. So after the first 12 months, you can get your first percentage. If you leave before 12 months, you leave with nothing. So what are you doing? You're protecting the best interest of the company, not yourself. So my 30%, I'm splitting it into 4. So each year, I have to work hard to earn my 7.5% per year. Sindo? Or however you gradually do it. If by year 2, I've decided to leave, what am I leaving the company with? With 15%, Sindo? But you can imagine, if you had started the normal way, you'd be fighting loggerheads with your co-founders because you own half the company. But this way, you can have somebody leave, and then you can discuss, how can I buy back some of those shares? And I'll get into it. The other thing you have in your co-founders agreement is the eventuality that either of you leave, what would happen to that leaving? Meaning, how do you buy back shares? Huh? Are we buying it at market rate? All that. Yeah. Do I have the right to buy back shares? So you can have that in your agreement. The fourth agreement, and one of your team members here talked about it, is what are you bringing on the table? I don't know who raised it. Financial obligations. I don't know whether it was that gentleman. Yeah, that was the one. What are you bringing on the table? Mimi, well, let's say I come from a good family. I can afford to go convince my fathers, my folks back at home, invest in me 100K, assuming you didn't say it is school fees that you didn't pay. Invest in me 100K, I'll go start a business. But then me, I come from a family that might not be possible. So you all have to say, what did I bring on the table? And then you value it. So there's sweat equity, there's financial equity. Sweat equity is where I've just come and I'm doing the work, but I'm not earning anything. I know it's conk. Are we tired? We're still earning? All right, perfect. So you agree, what are you bringing on the table, and then you value it. Sawa? And then that will determine how you share that split. I mean, how you split those shares. It is not just vibes and inshallah, you're my friend, I'm a friend, let's 50-50. Look at those factors and then agree. I'm sure amongst your groups, when you're doing lunch, deliberate whether what you had in mind covered that. Okay? We'll come for round 2. Remember when you did your CR12, silikuwa na shareholders na directors. So you're the shareholders. What does a shareholder agreement do? Or what does shareholding mean? There's something called corporate governance. We talk about it mainly in large organizations. But hello, it applies to you. Okay. It heavily applies to you. So when you go there kwa CR12, mnaona director/shareholder, you are playing 2 responsibilities as a co-founder, if anything 3. The first one is you are the first employee of your company. By the way, you should have an employee agreement just like everybody else. So if we fire you as the CEO, we can fire you as the CEO, but we don't have to remove you as a shareholder. Okay? Second, shareholders appoint directors of a company. That's what we call an executive board that sits by law or generally 4 times a year. Sometimes you're alone, so you can sit and do your annual meetings alone. So when you go in and you register a company, what are the things they ask you? For board resolution. And then you go quickly draft it. You say the board met on this date. How many have done that? If you've done a board resolution registering a company, let me see your hand. I'm a bank. Kuna moja huko. Sasa huko serious. So how many people were in your board meeting? You yourself and you. 5. That's a good one. Some of us are me, myself, and I. Yeah? When you registered your company. So your board is your executive team. Most of the time, they're your co-founder. So we tend not to look at this seriously. But why I want you to look at it seriously is for 2 reasons. When you exit a co-founder, you may also need to exit them as shareholders and buy shares. So it is apparent that you have a clear shareholders agreement. Okay. Number 2, if you're getting investors in your company, investors have become shareholders as well. So this will also govern your relationship with them. There are times when an investor tells you, I would like a seat at your board. What does that mean? If you've not seen, I don't know any of you remember OpenAI, Sam Altman being fired by the board. You remember that? This happens. So you find yourself, yeah, it's okay. Just give me $100,000. I need a seat at the board, sure. So you have a seat at the board. And then you go on, you have 4 investors in your board and then 2 or 3 of your co-founders. The day your investors come and tell you, we are passing a board resolution to fire you as a CEO. Who will you have to blame? Because you haven't figured out who qualifies to have a seat at your board. You're just saying yes, 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 yes. So things you have in your in your shareholders agreement are things like when you're giving people seats, what right do they have to vote? Yeah? How do they vote? What happens when you're at a deadlock? Is it 50-50? Someone said 50-50. Or is it 49-51? How does it go? 2, how do you buy back shares? And then 3 is how do you sell shares? Supposing you're a minority shareholder, you've been diluted, we're now at 15% now. Yeah? And the company is to be sold. What right do you have as a minority shareholder? Because, and I will show you, as a co-founder, if you plan to exit your company or to watch it grow in the next 8 years, a time will come you're the minority, and it is okay. I think Jeff Bezos was talking about Jeff Bezos owns what percent in his company? Any guess? Any guess? Any guesses? No one. Come on, guys. You can try. You want to try here? 7. That's close. Here? You can. I can see you. Sorry? 1 million, 1.2, but it's equivalent to what percentage? I can see you're searching. Guess. So Jeff owns, I think as last as publicly announced, around 11% of his shares. Yeah? He's still a billionaire. That doesn't change. But what we're saying is, over time, your shareholding will change. So if your shareholders' agreement is not clear to what this means for you, the Google brothers or the Google founders at some point had to be exited from their company, but they had very early negotiated the fact that they will always remain in the board. That can never be removed. That was a good strategy. So those are some of the things. Initially, it might feel like it's a lot, but over time, as you build your company, it becomes apparent that these are the 2 documents that we all tend to ignore, that we all must have. So the next time you go to eCitizen and register a company and you have your model articles and your memorandums, please remember they're not the documents that govern startups, that you'll still need to come back and to do these 2. Okay? So we're not coffee break and we're not going to lose faith. So we will get into the next thing. So that we wrap it up. I have a very short window of time before lunch. What time is lunch? 1? It's 1 in 40 minutes. So, guys, can we stretch for a bit? Now we're getting into the technical financials. Let's stretch. Just stand up, stretch. I can hear the sounds. Now, I want us to do a very small exercise. Some of you who've rushed the washroom, so the rest of you who've remained, I want us to do one small exercise. I mean, you've all done it maybe in many sessions, but I'd like us to try something, yeah? So stand closer to somebody. A couple of you, I'd like you guys to be closer to each other. Are you all taking a bathroom breaks? Do you come out touch? Yeah. So stand closer to somebody. Now, when to at least 4 or 5 people close to you, try and form like lines, or circles. Stand closer to people. All right? So this is a very simple exercise. I'd like you to stretch your right hand. When I say 1, you stretch your right hand. Okay? So can we do that 1? All right? If I say 2, lift your index finger on the left side. All right? So make sure that your index finger is right below the palm or the person next to you. All right? When I say 3, you have an obligation to either grab or be grabbed. Okay? So when I say 3, so let's see the hands and the handed. First, can you grab the person next to you without being grabbed? Okay? Now, can we try? We do a trial. So 1 is stretch your right hand. 1, 2, 2, 3. All right, so this time round, I would like you to listen because I'll give a story, but I need you to be attentive. Where you hear 1 is where you stretch your hand. Where you hear 2 is when you the thumb, and where you hear 3 is when you grab. So one day, I was walking in town with John and Jerry. Then we came across 4 cows. Well, each of the cow had 2 horns. But what was surprising wasn't the 2, but the madris that were around. All right, thank you guys. All right. Who's been grabbed and who's grabbed? I don't know where your attention was. Nice. All right. So perfect. So let's see whether you are as easy to grab the money as you are to grab the fingers, okay? So when we're talking about startup funding, I'll talk about 5 main sources of startup funding. And you will agree with me, this is not a finance class. But remember, we said foundations of startups are heavily on the low side of it. Yeah? We are the people who, we're the oils carry your vehicles at Hamtuoni. So the first source of startup funding is something we call equity. Say equity, and not Equity Bank. So equity is in 2 ways. Equity is the money you get from either the co-founders that you have. Remember when I said if you as co-founder have some pocket money, you can invest. Sindio. And by the way, you can start building on startup funding, on startup fund by bootstrapping through Chums. Download Chums. I use it. The second source of equity is your angel investors. What do we call them? Who knows the full name of the 3 Fs? Yeah? I feel like, John, you've known this for a while. Who else? 3 Fs. When we say 3 Fs, we mean? What's the first F? Yeah? Friends, family, fools. Yes. So the 3 Fs are called friends. So the friends around you, guys, we can say, I am starting a business. Would you like to invest in this? It will cost you 10,000 for this amount of shares. Yeah? Or you go to your family and you tell them, please invest. Or any random fool out there. By the way, we don't say fools because they're fools, because of simple things. It is your first idea. You're probably a first-time founder who is foolish enough to invest in you. That's what we mean. But that can only be the person who really, really, truly believes in you. So that is your angel round. Then the third one is sweat equity. Equity can come as a form of sweat, meaning I have nothing, no financials to bring on the table, but I'm the best coder you'll find. I can come on board and earn my shares and be the CTO by putting in my sweat. And you can quantify that sweat, including how many hours will I code. Of course, devs will tell you, we don't like being timed by time. Who is a dev? You tell me, agree with me if it's true. Be like, listen, you can't tell me 3 hours a week. Sometimes I have inspiration, other times, right? True. Anyway, but you can figure out what that means for you. The second source of funding is through loans. So you can borrow from banks. So I'll talk about the first round. The first round of equity, it's simple. You have your co-founders agreement, or you have either a term sheet or a safe. And I'll come into what a term sheet and a safe means. It is the easiest way. It's agreement for future equity, or a term sheet that gives you money upfront, or just share transfer. It's simple documentation that allows you get money from person A to person B. Okay. We mainly tend to use term sheets longer, especially in seed, but for the longest time, term sheets were also used before, even for the angel rounds. And then obviously with sweat equity, again, it's also co-founders agreement. We've gotten into that. Then you can also get loan. Now this loan can come from any lender, whether it's bank or any other lender. But then we also have a different type of loans, which we call convertible debt or convertible loan. So what this means is I'm going to give you, let's say $100,000 at an interest of, let's say 8%, convertible on these terms. So meaning you don't have to return that money, we can convert it into equity. So most of the convertible notes, convertible debt, or convertible loans come from impact investors. And you find majority of them going, especially in the climate space or the fintech space, because they're giving you money, they have enough money, it's almost, they're happy to lend you, they're lending you, but they're also willing to put the skin in the game and maybe potentially see if I can invest. But they're investing in future, not now. So they're also banking on you becoming investable, right? And most of the time, they also want to see how much traction do you have before, meaning have you raised revenue before or not? So you sign convertible notes as well. How we do that is through a safe. That's an agreement for future equity. That's how we also sign. I'll try and see if I can give you a sample of a safe. But you can check out online even a YC safe. How does that look like? It's a very standard document. Then the third way is the cheap route and the hardest route. And I say cheap and hard for two reasons. It's not easy to get, they're grants. They're free money that can be given by an NGO or a government. They're easy because you don't have to pay back. They're hard because you have to be accountable for it. You know, they'll tell you, report, update, all that, right? So it's easy and hard at the same time, depending on where you're coming from. Now, if you're starting a startup, please check out, are there grants applicable in these areas? You might find that there are some that would apply for you. So apply for them, okay? The fourth is venture capital. I think we all look for VC money. Tindo. So venture capital money comes in exchange again for ownership. And they move from pre-seed level all the way up to before PE money. So venture capital, I also include private equity fund maybe on this. So venture capitals want to come in when you've done proof of concept, when you have a minimum viable product, when you have some revenue, some level of traction. And in most cases, they will come after you've done your angel rounds, right? And they want to invest in your business to scale it. So you have to have a very clear structure and basis and business model for you to do it. So do you remember this advice you're giving here to Sarah and John? So once you sorted out that drama, then only then can you say that I'm ready for VC money, because it also is heavy DD. In countries that people who, there are countries, especially going to Silicon Valley, that you can get VC money with an idea coming on stage and pitching. Here, it is not, unfortunately. We require a lot of traction. The unfortunate thing is we also don't have a lot of VC money coming in. And we also use the same route. VCs prefer to use safes because the reason for is you are doing a fundraising round. And you could be fundraising, you could say, I'm raising 250, let's start with small money, 250,000 or 500,000. And you have to raise from different people. So investor one will give you 100,000, investor two will give you 200, investor three will give you the rest. Yeah. So you want to make sure you close your round before you come and do the share allocation. Okay. And you'll have had to have a valuation of it. sometimes you either do pre-money or post-money valuation, meaning is it valuation before or after you have raised money. So I won't get heavy into that, because if we get more into it, we'll get further, and most of it is on investment. But from a legal route is, you don't want, at this rate, you have to be very careful with two things. One is you need to have a clear valuation, because you also don't want to be over diluted. Number two is, remember the shareholders point that I mentioned. You need to be very, very clear on how many seats are you giving. Don't go to every VC, you're giving them a board seat, board seat, board seat. By the time you're done with that round, you have no board seat left. You literally are a sole board member with 4 different VCs with a board seat. These are some of the things that you negotiate. 3 is, they'll ask you for, in case of an exit, will I be paid first or last? Yeah? We talk about preferential payments. So those are some of the risks that I've seen people, startup founders, lose heavy, is you giving your VCs double the dip. Meaning you pay them in case you exit or in case the company collapses, you pay them for their money, and they also come in and invest. And I'm releasing a book. Hopefully I'll share that with you on how that can be avoided. But I think for me, venture capital is, you raise around, by the time you're getting there, of course, we'll have further conversations. You raise around from many VCs, or you have and most of the time you'll have to have a lead VCs who can also introduce you to other VCs. Then you'll do a safe document, and after that safe round, then you do a share transfer, and you can do a dilution on a cap table. And then the fifth one is, and it's something that has been on our regulations for the last 2 years, but we haven't implemented it fully, is crowdfunding. I think Nigerians do this very well. So crowdfunding is through platforms where you come in and say, okay, Anza Village is raising, and I'm opening it out for anybody to invest as low as 1,000 shillings. Our goal is to raise 100,000 $100,000, let's say. So you, with whatever you have, you see Harambe style, yeah? So that's how crowdfunding is. If you ask me, it should be something that we are currently doing for our startups. It's the easiest thing of saying, can we get local funding? But crowdfunding also requires what I mentioned that we don't do, which is corporate governance. Because CMA wants to guarantee that any Kenyan who comes to invest in your business is sure that your business is sensible. Yeah? So if you do not have clear corporate governance in your organization, then CMA will not allow you be listed in a crowdfunding platform as of now. It's obviously, we are always having conversations on how corporate governance looks like for startups. Those are the 4 ways of business. Now, regardless of which of these routes that you do, it's going to dilute your company, and there are other ways in which you dilute your company. And this is where now startup lawyers come in. Because when you raise, we have to think through how that share structure looks like for you, right? I may not do the valuation, somebody might do the valuation, but I want to look at it. So their main, obviously, whether it's equity financing or any other financing, it will include dilution in your company. The other form of dilution is, remember when I asked whether you have employees? Yeah? Some of your early stage employees, and I think some mentioned here, you may have employees that you cannot afford to pay, but they're good and they believe in your vision. You do not want to say, because you're not my co-founder, that you cannot get anything. We have something called employee stock option plans. We don't do them a lot here, which is a big mistake. We should, but it allows you give your best performing employees a reason to stick around. And it could go as high as 5%. Please don't go too high. Yeah? So you're giving them, and the reason why you don't go too high is because you're going to over dilute your company. You give them a percentage, and you also give them money, because they also need to pay rent, survive, all that, yeah? Some of the people that I know who started as ESOP, I think, and I use Nala, is one of the CEOs, started as an ESOP, as an employee, grew up, and then there they are building with Benji. I know that because we've had quite many conversations with that. But For ESOPs, why I think you need to consider that is, among us, you and the co-founders, is go out and look for somebody who can help you implement. They may not put a lot, but I mean, they're committed to it, but they may not necessarily have given you the initial contribution of your initial work needed, but they can grow with you and they can go beyond, and they're not in a hurry to leave and get so much funding. You also do the same thing we did with co-founders. They vest over a 4-year cycle. And then you can also do the convertible note, securities, debt, whichever convertible route you use, depending on which which region. It means the same thing anyway. It's whatever you're having converted into equity. And then obviously that leads to stock splits. I want to give you a good example of a dilution. I don't know whether this is visible. You might find that after, let's say, a pre-seed round, that your founders, so when you're beginning, you start with 100% of that table. In fact, I'll give a good example. See the table in front of you? It is all round. You own it at the beginning, 100%, or maybe 50% because you have your co-founders. But as you grow, then you start growing. You start growing in terms of value, but you go down in terms of shareholding, which means there could be a good example. We talk about by the time you're getting to seed or Series A, you should, as co-founders, you shouldn't have less than 52% of ownership. They also expect that you've given a sort of an option pool for your ESOP, your employee share ownership. If you don't have, they will make you do it. Then you may have people who have convertible, who've given you money that will convert. So they will also further dilute. And then you could say we are fundraising for these large amounts of money, and our goal is to at least fundraise for 23.5%. This is a good example. It's not to mean that this is the number that you have to use. Just to break it down a little bit further, this is how you begin. As founders, pre-financing, this is how your cap table will look. Founders have 100%. Option pool for employees, you have 0. Sindio? Because at that point you haven't given anything to employees. You probably don't have any convertible note or debt, and then you don't have new equity. Then you decide I'm going to now have an ESOP, so you give maybe, let's say, 15%. You do anything between 10 to 20%. So averagely, let's say we're doing at 15%, but you still don't have any convertible at this point, and you still don't have equity. And remember, this will change depending on each organization. I'm just using a good example is John and Sarah. And then you have somebody comes in and tells you, we'll give you a convertible note. That becomes a first investor, maybe not even an angel investor. So we will take 17.6% of it. And then so this will shrink everybody. Why you want to do your ESOP early is because it is diluted along the way. Otherwise, if you come in and you have to do it at the end, it will dilute your equity and not everybody else's. Everything dilutes. So if you read my note here, it says your stock splits will not change, but your percentage ownership will change. Meaning you can own 100% of 100,000 or 52% of $2 million. Which one is better? Yeah? So I know this looks very technical now, but think about it this way. We are selling land. Let me use land because we are Kenyans. Okay. Niko na ka acre. This acre, I bought it today. I bought it for 100,000 Kenya shillings. Okay. Then I would like to develop this land into apartments. But I don't have money to develop the apartments. So what do? I go look for a developer. Sindio. But I also need an engineer, architects and the likes. So I also might also need these people along the way. Sindio. So by the time we are done, While my land may have been 100,000 shillings, but since I brought in people to help me build, now you see that that building is now valued at 12 million Kenya shillings. Yeah? But remember how much my land was worth? 100,000. But since I was not ready to spend so much money, I told the developer, I'll give you the land, you do the building. Yeah? And maybe for me to do that, I had to give out at least 50% of the value. So while I own 50%, how much is my 50% worth? 6 million. Sindio? As a good example. Then we decide we will sell these properties as houses. Tumeingia biashara. But you remember where I started? With my acre of land. So consider your business in that way. That as you grow, your shareholding will shift because you're allowing more people on the table around you, but you have more resources and the company value keeps growing. That's why you see the likes of Jeff Bezos having 11% and owning millions of dollars, because the company is worth trillions of dollars. You get? But 20, 30 years ago, it was worth? It was in losses, right? Tumeelewana hapo? Any questions? Go ahead. Do we have a mic? Do you feel you're Lewis, are you around? Okay, let me come closer to you. Any other before we proceed? Tuko sawa? One more and then proceed.
Okay, thank you so much. My question is just about the stocks splits. So you said your stock splits don't change percentage ownership, especially when you are the founder. But now, let's say, for example, you want to start a company and you need $1 million USD. But now you as the founder, you have only 5K. And then you get other investors who want to invest their money in your company. So how do you make sure you as the founder, you benefit more than them? I don't understand how you have explained it. Maybe you can give us an example that's practical for us to understand very well. Thank you.
All right. There's also another question somewhere else. I don't know whether it's related. Is it? Okay.
Okay, my question is not related with what is being discussed right now, but you discussed it before. It's about what happens exactly when a member of a group decides to sell a property that's belonging to the whole group. And so, okay, if I can explain briefly what happened is that we once found ourselves in terrible situation where we were to purchase an incubator, and later we came to realize that it belonged to a group. So there are two conflicting documents here. The one that belonged to the group, so they already had a legal document that cannot allow a member of a group to sell a property. And then here again, one member of a group wants to sell the property. So which legal document overrides the other? The one that was made before, or this one that we are having as a new thing? So.
All right. So I'll take those two questions. I'll come to you later. Just maybe note it down so that I wrap it up. So question for you, I think that one is very easy. You cannot sell that which you do not own. So if the individual member does not fully own the right to sell, then they cannot sell. Okay? So when it's a group ownership, it requires either you sell your share, where you can say, I'm going to sell, if I own 10% shares in this, I can sell my share. But also remember that even selling of shares is subject to whether the group has agreed. They may have the right to be the first people to buy those shares. So it's subject to the rules of that. So if you as a group went and bought the incubator, the first thing is you do your due diligence. If you did not do your due diligence, ignorance is no defense. It's the same thing as land. You go and you're duped that so and so owns the land, and you've made the payments. Yeah, the law assumes that you should have done what? due diligence to authenticate the ownership of that land. Okay. For you, in terms of, let me explain this afresh. I know this is very technical. It is actually not legal, but I'm just using these to take you back to some of the things that you need to understand for your cap table. Number one, when you start the company, we call it, let's say, pie. Yeah? When you start pie as a sole owner, you own what? 100%. You bring in Ochieng, and you say we are going 50-50, although you say that that is dangerous. You own what? 50%. But what did Ochieng come with? You came with 100, but then Ochieng found you that you've bought more. So we've told him we're no longer at this value. So for you to buy your 50%, you need to bring how much? 500K. So there's more money. So he has to buy your shares technically. Sindo. So you're kind of selling 50% of your shares to Ochieng. So every time you're bringing in somebody, you're selling a bit of your shares at a certain value. But that value will be valued at that point in time. So the percentage, well, it's going to change because it keeps reducing unless you decide to go back and buy. Because as a startup founder, remember, you're also entitled to buy shares back. So the percentage, well, it keeps shrinking. You as the value of the company can keep going up. Because every money coming into the company, why are you selling the shares of the company? It's to get money to build more. Tunaelewana hapo? Does it make sense? I know it's hard, but we'll get back. I'm sure by the time we continue, we'll explain. So as you continue, every single percentage you're selling, think about it as land. If I needed to build in that 1 acre of land and I didn't have a developer, what would I have done? I divide the land, yeah? I sell off an eighth, sindio? That money gives me money ya kujenga, maybe nifikishe first floor. Nione ni kama haikunisaidia. I go back and sell off another eighth. Nimalizie. So I have gone with, by the time I am done, I own only a half of that land, let's say, sindio? But the value of the building is worth more because I was able to offset some of this. That's what it means. Yeah? And as you continue to give your shares or as you continue to build, some of these things will become more apparent. I'll try and see if you can get some of these slides. It might help you. Now, I will point out the 2 documents at the bottom because they are legal. But the first 3 documents, you should have them anyway. I don't know whether you went through your session yesterday. How many of you have a pitch deck? You do? Less than a quarter of you. All right. How many of you have financial statements? Good. Some of you do. How many of you have either a business plan or a business model canvas? Mulipitia hizi jana, si ndio? So you do. Either you didn't work on them or you're going to work on them, si ndio? All right. And then the 2 documents is, one of them is the cap table. And the reason why I was going through that earlier illustrations here is because this will define your cap table next. And then the legal documents. So legal documents are simple things. Your company registration certificate, your CR12, yeah? What else? Your contracts, co-founders agreement, your shareholders agreement. Hizi vitu zenye zote nilimention, you put them in one folder. So when next you're going to fundraise, usiseme you don't have a data room or a D room. Sindoi. Okay? So take notes. So that when they tell you we are going through due diligence, this is what they're going to check. I mentioned cap table, just to clarify what a cap table is, and I don't know whether these are legible. A cap table will have at least 6 things. One is your shareholders' information. Who is your shareholder? What are their details? Who are they? Where are they from? Who are their mothers, grandmothers? Okay, maybe not those details. And then they share class information. When you registered your company, what did you find? Muliregister kama ordinary shareholders, ndio? Yeah, there's another class called preferential shareholders, but you don't use it until later in your investment round because it means it's only used for investors who it's a preference to pay them first in case of any things like exits, bankruptcy, or dividends. Okay. So you rarely use this share class unless you are raising at Series A. So at that point in time, we'll get into that. Can I finish this and then you ask? Perfect. Then the first one, the third item you're going to need is ownership percentage. So at that time, you continuously update your cap table. So the same way I've done here, yeah, where you come in and say, this is founder A owns this percent. This is the ESOP. This is how much it is. So you need that ownership percentage. And then investment history. Your cap table should tell you who has invested in your company, your angels, your first investors, so on and so forth. And then the final two things is dilution information. So you've seen how I've done the dilution information? You've seen it? Yeah? Okay. And then the final thing is an option pool. So do you have an option pool and for what percent? So that is, that's why I said I needed you to blood for that session. It is a legal financial session. It is the only bit that we say it's the most technical bit about it's the intersection of law and finance. It's a bit technical. I'd like you all at some point to go through financial investments because then that will open up this more and more. All right, so we have one or two questions and then we wrap it, I wrap up my session. Do I wrap this and then I come to the questions, yeah? So there are favorable startup. I know I have a question from there and there. So there are favorable startup jurisdictions. Of course, we say Kenya is one of them. Why we say it's favorable is because, come on, we are raising the highest investment money in Africa. So we cannot say we are not favorable. And at least our citizen is first. We have our own issues. We may go down the streets, on the streets, but it's still better. Because investors believe in Kenya, they will come to Kenya. We have a lot of investors. Number two is Delaware. Most investors will tell you go and register in Delaware. Sindio? But I'll caution, do not register in Delaware unless you show your fundraising in that in the US jurisdiction, because it also carries its own responsibilities of taking care of the legal bit of it. And the other region in Africa is Mauritius. You find a lot of startups registering in Mauritius. Singapore is another good example. Estonia, Canada, Latvia, for those in fintech. So all these are regions that startups invest in or investors are in. And so these are areas that you could actually consider when you're fundraising. Meaning they're not just favorable because their jurisdictions are good or their legal systems are good, but also because they have good investors in the space. We went through this case study, so we won't go through it. But just a question. Having gone through the session, does it make it easier if you were to do that case study afresh? Would it be much more easier? Okay. So we'll come back and hear your feedback from the team now. See what you've improved on it. So yeah, so that is my session for the day. For the initial bit, we will come into discussions in the next phase. I have 5 minutes for Q&A. So let's hear from that side. You wanted a question, or you're done? All right. We had a question here. I don't know whether we have a mic. Okay, so we have a question there first, and then we'll come to you.
I do have a question in terms of shareholders. As startups, normally, when you come up with ideas, you find that like you are a team of 2, 3, 4, 5 people or more. And then as you continue to grow, you realize there are some people who are not putting in equally as much effort as you guys are putting. So in this case, how do you go about it, considering as startups, you don't usually start with legal documentation or such concepts. You just start as a group with an idea as you progress. How do you go about kind of defining the whole setup and how to progress, okay?
How you do it is, I said, the first document you must have is your founder's agreement. You see this agreement? It is not meant for companies that have been registered. It is meant for you right now on that table to come in and say, what's your name, if I may ask?
I'm Immaculate.
Amina. So it's for you to say, Amina, Immaculate, sorry, Immaculate, and your two co-founders, as a good example, we've decided we want to start this business. See, you were spending so much time deliberating on the idea and how to execute. So who is the team lead? Are you the team lead? So if you are the team lead, along the way of deciding or appointing the roles that we mentioned previously, who does what and all that, you make sure that this is in a document that you agree. It does not have to be complicated. Okay, it is saying Immaculate will do so and so. So and so will get X, Y, Z. And this is what would happen if you grow. This will translate into Immaculate getting, let's say, 25% of the shareholding in the company. In the event that Immaculate does not do the work, this is what would happen. You get? And then you do what I mentioned, which is vesting of shares. You don't give everything, Immaculate, you don't give everybody everything, and you tell them, day one, kwa CR12. So this founders agreement you register before you go to eCitizen. Sawa? You have it before, so that by the time you're going to eCitizen, you've all made a covenant that this is what you will do. If in the event that Kamau, who is probably in your team member, decides not to do the work, what do you have? You have a prenup to kick them out of the company. Do you or don't you not? That is the easiest way of getting things done. Because the first year, we talk about a 12 months cliff because it allows you know who your co-founders are. If they're not doing anything in the first 12 months, you're telling them, pack and leave. Separate your emotions from your company. It is not easy, I know, but with a document, it's easier to say you committed to this. Question number 2.
Okay, I have 2 questions. Number 1, how do you value IP or say patents when dividing shareholding percentages when you are forming a company? Then number 2, in a co-founded company, how are shareholding percentages adjusted when onboarding a new shareholder?
All right, that's a good question. We can take 2 more. Can we take maybe from here as well? I know, by then I'll be back for the afternoon session as well, so no worries. We can take a question there and then a question there near the screens. And then the lady here.
Okay, thank you. My question is, for us international students who want to build a startup, what different procedure do we need to follow from the one you discussed before in Kenyan term? Thank you.
Right. So what different procedures do we need? Sorry, sir, what was your question? The second question was on what? Before I forget it.
Well, the first question was, how
No,
do
I got the first one. The second one?
on how are the shareholding percentages adjusted
Okay,
when
alright.
onboarding a new shareholder?
All right. And then you're talking about foreign. And then the final question you can hear from here.
Hello, Isaac. I had 2 questions. One was on the share classes. When it comes to distribution of the voting rights within your organization, how do you assign the share classes to the different shareholders? And my other question is on intellectual property. I come from a background of cybersecurity, and one of the greatest threats we've seen towards intellectual property is reverse engineering. We have people who come in and they're able to see how your product works and try to replicate it and add maybe a feature or two. What are like the legal, maybe the legal boundaries or barriers that intellectual property could have, especially for hardware-based products and such?
All right. So for the two questions on IP, I'll be having an IP session this afternoon. So we are discussing purely IP. Then the first question is on share classification. I'll start with you. So there are two types of share classification. It's either ordinary shares or preferential shares. So the ordinary shares is what you as all co-founders begin. So it doesn't change your voting right based on classification. Preferential shareholders, more or less, you try and keep them away from your board. Otherwise, if they're in your board, you find that in most investors they'll have both classes, the preferential and the ordinary. So you can't say as a in your shareholders agreement, because that's where it belongs, that either you're voting based on the director seats. So if you have 4 directors, maybe let's say you and your co-founder and then 2 other investors, obviously you've messed your board voting, because that means you're at a deadlock. So you always go for either an even number, okay? The other option would be you vote based on the value of your shares. Meaning, if I own 52% value, this is what the majority votes. In most cases, we tend to go with this based on the value of the shareholding as opposed to the number of seats. But there are certain scenarios in which if your shareholders agreement talks about voting based on the number of seats, then that is what it could mean. In terms of how do you do valuation, how does valuation of shares move from point A to point B is simple. It's the same thing as you do with this. You may start with your 100% shareholder as a co-founder, but as you continue to grow and you bring in more co-founders, you're giving them extra shares within your company. And of course, you have to value what are they bringing on the table. Same thing we're doing with dilution pie for other investors is the same way you as your co-founders would do a dilution pie. Okay, so it doesn't change how you do it. I feel like I've forgotten that question. That was for the foreign people. So you remember why I mentioned about different jurisdictions. So it doesn't matter whether you're Kenyan or foreign. If you intend to do business in Kenya, it will apply the same way. It's only that it might be different in that there are things that you'll be required as a foreigner to have. For instance, things like alien ID and all that, for you to be able to have a KRA pin that allows you to trade locally. But it doesn't change whether you're a Kenyan or a foreigner. Chances are maybe you have a Kenyan co-founder who is in that space and you want to do it. You can also do something called flip up, where you decide to pick any of these jurisdictions. Some of these jurisdictions allows you to have e-residency, like Estonia and Latvia and so on. Delaware does the same. It doesn't matter where you are globally. You can also register in certain jurisdictions. Of course, each jurisdiction will have its own requirements. But what is dictated is not the laws of where you come from. It is the laws of where you are. So even if a Kenyan wanted to go register in Delaware, you'd have to follow the same rules as if a foreigner is coming to register in Kenya. Now, if the company is registered in a foreign entity, then you don't have to register a completely new company. You can register either a subsidiary or a branch of a foreign company, meaning that maybe your holding company, your whole core is in either of the other jurisdiction. And so what you have in any country you're going are subsidiaries. Case in point, I have a fintech. Let me use the case of Chums. Maybe Chums, the mother entities, let's say it's registered in Mauritius. Yeah. So Kenya would be a subsidiary or a branch. The same with Uganda, Nigeria, and the likes. So it will follow the same methodology. So allow me stop there so that we don't keep you from lunch. I need a clear covenant or the fact that we have a very heavy session also in the afternoon. So let's manage our lunch.
All right. Okay, thanks, Leah. Please give her a better round of applause if you've learned something, yeah? All right, awesome. So let's break for lunch. It's now 6 minutes past 1. Please, let's be back here at 2 sharp so she can take the next hour and a half and we try and finish a little bit earlier. The lunch vouchers will be handed out as you exit the tent over there. So make sure you grab a voucher and lunch will be at the same place it was yesterday. So we'll be back at what time? At 2 sharp, please. If you can come before, even better. We'll start at 2. Thank you.